the reasons that I call this channel the Roller Pigeon Evolution is the evolution is not the birds. The birds are fully evolved. They're not going to evolve into something else.
I swear I almost lost it all, but all I know is grind hard. They ain't taking my spot. You can learn to win till you take a loss. I swear I lost so many times in the past.
Hello everybody and welcome to another edition of the Roller Pigeon Evolution. I'm your host Smitty and my co-host today is Louis Quintero, new addition to the family. Say hi to everybody, Louis.
Hello everybody.
All right, so this is another episode in the bird's eye view episodes that we're doing. Today we are at the home of John Vandenbrock, JV.
Howdy.
Say hi to the folks out there. And we're going to talk about a wide range of subjects today. So John was gracious enough to invite us over here, and we are going to talk about his vast knowledge of rollers and some of the experiences and some of the things that he had that I think is going to be hugely beneficial to you guys at home. You'll see things from a different perspective. Our first interview on the Bird's Eye View episodes was with Richard Apodaca, and again today we're here at the home of John Vandenbrock. So let's just get into it, John. So a couple of things that I wanted to talk about. One specifically is something that people have asked me about and something that I've talked about. And sometimes when I talk to people, you get that deer in the headlights. And so one of the things is blur.
Okay.
So when I say blur, what I'm talking about is an extreme representation of roll when birds go into hyperspace, when they literally turn it up a notch that you don't see every day, where a bird literally the wingtips disappear and you've got a small little ball and that's all there is, and it literally blurs. It's not clear to the naked eye. What do you call blur?
That's a good explanation. I've been doing pigeons sometimes around 50 years maybe. And I've been all over this United States judging, and I've judged more than 1,000 kits in the air.
Wow, 1,000 kits. That's pretty damn good.
I would think through the years, from about 95 through 2005 or so, I've judged probably every World Cup fly and every fall fly. Mm-hmm. And since then, I've done a couple of other judging. And in my judging, I've never seen a blur. I've seen probably 4 times in my lifetime, I've seen a bird that blurred out.
Right.
One time it was a dark check with white flights. That's amazing to see, because you see the dark hub and then you see the white flights go around. And now a blur, if you're not watching the kid closely, you're not going to see it, because it's over as quickly as it starts. Because
let me stop you right there. And the reason I say that, listen to what John said. If you're not watching, it's over in seconds. A bird is not going to blur for 3 poles.
No, they'd break their neck or whatever it was.
Or they'd explode.
Yeah, like the faster a bird rolls, the greater what you would say, the greater pressure or the greater that it puts on a bird.
Force,
yeah,
basically.
it's just they can't do it.
No. A bird is only going to roll so fast.
I've heard people tell me they got a 3-second blur, but of course that doesn't happen. I mean, a bird can't do that. I mean, it's not physically possible. That's what people got to understand. And I'm sure that 3-second pigeon they were talking about was a pretty fast pigeon.
Exactly.
But a blur is something different. Like you say, the wings disappear, and it's
warp
just
drive, basically.
It makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up when you see it. It's amazing.
It's funny because the first time I saw it, I questioned what I saw.
Well, of course.
I'm like, did I really see that? That's what blur is. Blur is it's a otherworldly roll. And
well, we're definitely on the same page when it comes to that.
Right. So to clarify for a lot of you guys out there, blur does exist. It is something that I've seen in my birds. I've seen in other people's birds. And it's definitely something to strive for. It's hyperspace when it comes to roll. So the other thing that I wanted to ask you about, what is your opinion on the different patterns of roll? The H pattern, the A pattern, the different types of roll. What's the fastest you've found?
Basically what I like to see is kind of like the wings kind of disappearing on a bird, where it gives you kind of the hummingbird effect.
Right.
I think that's probably as good as it gets.
Yeah.
A pattern is pretty. The H pattern, for sure, if a bird's got some white to it, is kind of fun to see, fun to watch. And it's all good, but that thing when the wings blur out on you or seem to disappear,
Yeah.
that's faster. Talk about the hole, that from the old days. I think our birds are too small these days to show a hole.
So when people talk, you've heard people talk about the donut, seeing the donut.
Yeah.
To me, and this is my opinion, I'm curious as to what yours is, when a bird shows the hole, to me that bird's not going as fast as it should.
Well, that's what we see. Sometimes, you see a hole in it. They're talking about the hole back in the old days being like a quarter or a silver dollar.
Yeah.
Now anymore, it seems like it's bigger. It seems like the bird's rolling around that.
Exactly. To me, I equate that with a lack of velocity opposed
Yes,
to
I'm
high
with you.
velocity.
I'm with you.
Okay. So, and the other thing that I noticed is the A pattern roll. It appears to be faster when they roll that way, opposed to the H pattern.
I think it is a bit faster.
Yeah. So again, here's somebody with the same opinion that A pattern roll actually visually appears to be faster.
Yeah, I think if they got a little bit faster, then you'd start seeing the wings kind of look like they're transparent.
Right. So one of the other things I want to talk about is your particular family of birds. I'm sure over the years, you said you've been raising birds for 50 years?
Well, this family I have now, I basically started back in 1988.
Right.
I got back into pigeons let's say, 88, because I got back into pigeons about 85 after taking about 10 years off.
Right.
And I searched high and low because as a kid growing up, I really understood spin, at least I thought I did. And,
Right.
And I was very fortunate back when I was a child or a young teenager. I had some of the old guys, and they believed in spinners. And I've always believed in spinners.
That brings up a really good point. When you talk about spinners, so is there a difference between a spinner and a roller?
Yes.
Elaborate on what you
Now,
know
roll,
that to be.
roll and I'd say spin is the top of the list, and then roll comes in all kinds of different patterns. Sideways, slow, where you can almost count the revolutions,
Right.
and then up, better and better. Spinners, I think you're going to that, at least to that A pattern.
Yeah. Yeah.
Outside of that, I think they're just rollers.
So I have another question. So if just take this on a hypothetical, you've got 20 feet of space.
Okay.
And you got a bird that is a spinner and he rolls 20 feet.
Right.
You got a bird that is a high velocity roller and he rolls the same 20 feet.
Yeah.
Which bird did more roll?
Well, of course, the high velocity bird, he's going to turn over more times, and that's why we get to the faster bird is the more stress it puts on that pigeon.
Exactly.
And that's why, like, people say, God, I got a 60-foot blur. It's hard for me to fathom that. I know we see a lot of 60-foot rollers.
Right.
And I think when we get them, it's too deep.
Mm-hmm.
And in my experience, most 60-foot rollers tend to crash eventually.
Right.
They'll be landing above your roof 30 feet, and there they go. And
Right.
And
keep in mind, you have to keep this in context. When he says a 60-foot roller is too deep, John is referring to kit competition. For kit competition, kit competition, 60 feet, that bird rolls 60 feet out of the kit. It's going to take X amount of time for him to make it back to the
I'll
kit.
tell you, again with kit, let's talk for just a second. 2 years ago, I judged Rick Shaning up in Washington.
Mm-hmm.
Probably flew the best kit that I've ever judged.
Wow.
His birds were of the 40-foot range, going 10, 12 at the same time. And the thing that I thought was amazing about his birds, that the remainder of the kit, let's say 10 birds rolled 40 feet out of the kit.
Right.
The kit would circle back and pick those birds up.
Wow.
And that's amazing to me.
Rick Shaning, what stage?
He's flying some English. They're basically English crosses that he has.
Okay.
But very, very, I gave him 900 points, and for me to give someone 900 points. And
900 points?
And with no three-quarter turns.
Wow, those birds were working.
Yeah, they were awesome, and I think the most awesome thing was the way that the depth and the
they
way
were 40-foot birds.
Yeah, and 10, 12 of them going at the same time, and even when 5 or 6 birds rolled off the back, the kit would turn and pick those up. Just an amazing kit. That kit was just amazing.
So for our viewers out there, when we talk about kit competition, and I'm going to break it down because there's a lot of newbies, there's a lot of guys that are just starting out. So a kit is how many birds?
Well, let's just say 20.
20 birds. So when you call a full turn, how many birds are rolling in that kit?
All of them.
So 20 birds is a full turn.
Yes.
A half turn would be 10 birds.
Right.
And
that's what you got to strive for, because a 10 would become a 20.
right.
But the one thing that I've seen lately is that, you know, we're calling 10 foot, and the birds aren't 10 foot.
Right.
And I've always figured a good kit, a good scoreable kit, there's separation between the spinners or the rollers and the ones that don't roll.
Okay, so let me just clarify. So you've got that kit flying, and just say you have a half turn, right?
Uh-huh.
So 10 of those birds roll, 10 birds don't roll.
Right.
So when you talk separation, they need to have at least 10 feet from where
Well,
the birds
you
didn't
would
roll.
think if they were 10 footers that you were scoring.
And I think most of these guys should be able to breed 10 footers.
When the birds roll or they do something among each other.
Yeah, when they do a
And
twizzle
I'm
or
seeing that being scored, and I
because
think,
they did it all together.
yeah, well, what did they do? You know,
Yeah.
did they go 3 foot, 5 foot?
Yeah.
You know, I always figure, just like you're saying, if you got a kit flying and 10 birds roll,
Mhm.
or say it's 5 birds roll,
Right.
they're going 10 foot and the kit's moving, right?
Right.
So there should be some separation between the birds that roll and the kit, and that's when you start getting some quality.
So we're
from
talking
a
about
good judge.
separation. Let's go back for a minute. Separation. So what John is saying, in order to judge a kit correctly, you want to have separation, where those birds actually separate from the birds that didn't roll. That is going to be a key thing, and at least 10 feet of separation. I think that's.
Yeah, no, that's because 10 feet is a ways. I
Mhm.
mean, it's not a great distance, but yet
Right.
within 10 feet there
I think that
should be
should be
some separation.
I agree.
Should be able to see some separation in the pigeons.
So, what do you think about roll downs?
Column.
Call them.
I don't. Some people. I'm kind of a believer that if you breed out of a roll down,
Mm-hmm.
and say maybe the first generation you might get away with something like that,
Right.
but you're putting that gene into your birds, and maybe 2 generations down the road, all of a sudden it'll pop its ugly head out again.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm a firm believer that pigeons are what they are. If you breed out of non-kitters, you're going to get non-kitters. You breed out of roll downs, you're going to get roll downs.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. So let's talk a little bit about your family of birds. What does your family? What is it? What's the makeup of your family of birds?
It's pretty simple. Excuse me. It's pretty simple. I years ago when I got in the 80s, when I got back into rollers, I searched high and low for
Right.
what I remember as a kid. And when I went over to Joe Borges up in Lodi, California, I finally seen spinners again. And like I say, I had spent a lot of money trying to acquire some pigeons, and my basic family comes from the Keyser Borges pigeons and Hugo Bloss.
So when he says Keyser Borges, that is what's his first name? Joe Keyser
Joe Keyser and Joe Borges.
and Joe Borges.
Yeah, and they got what it was when Herb Sparks went into the service.
Mm-hmm.
They used his birds for about 4 years, and then they
Okay.
built their family around those birds. They were basically Pinson type of birds, for lack of a better word, and they had velocity of spin in them.
Right.
And of course, I started out like everybody else. I got birds from them, but they didn't. You don't get the best birds from somebody.
Right.
And I
to
worked
cultivate
hard on
those.
it, and I kept the very best spinners,
Mhm.
and pretty much got a nice family of spinners today. They're strong birds. They can fly too high.
Right.
They can cause you some trouble like that. But outside of that, as far as the roll goes, they're as good as it gets.
Right. Awesome. Who were the people would you say that were your mentors? The people that when you started to raise birds that you looked to say, wow, I want to be like that guy.
When I was a kid, of course, George Bellamy was very instrumental.
Okay.
And when I got back into pigeons, I thought I knew enough about pigeons to build a family, and it took some work.
Right.
I've had this family now for 30 years, and I'm still improving this family to date. At least I hope I am, because we can't never give up trying to improve. You know, when you get satisfied, hey, I got as good as it gets, you're going to get stuck. You've got to keep trying to improve your birds.
What do you think was your biggest challenge in raising rollers, or has been your biggest challenge?
With my family, my biggest challenge has been to keep the birds down.
Mm-hmm.
Because
when you say keep them down, what do you mean?
To keep them from going up too high.
Okay.
Because I'm a firm believer that when you get these birds that can actually really spin, they're strong, because that's the only way they can get themselves over that many times. And when you have strong birds, they can fly high. And I think that's why, like my good buddy John Desta used to say, that these guys that are really doing well in competition, they fly what he called a smooth roller.
Right.
In other words, the birds break together, have a lot of action,
right.
and they're not of extreme velocity. They're good
right.
velocity. If
right.
you want to score some points and with a decent judge, you've got to have some fairly good velocity.
Have you ever heard of something called the wall?
Yes.
Now, I was at a fly, and I saw it, and this particular person that I was at the fly, and I was at his house, and I was watching the birds fly, and it literally looked like the entire kit convulsed at one time.
Yeah. In other words, they're flying, and it's like they hit something. And
Yes, yes.
You know.
So we were at Will Stenhouse's place.
Yeah.
And I was watching his birds, great quality on the roll, very good birds. I was really impressed by the quality of birds that he flew. And matter of fact, his family is...
You said they were
English. It's English.
Mason?
Mason. They're Mason birds. From what I gather, that's the bulk of his family. And I was really stunned, and I watched his birds, and they got to one point, and literally, it's like you had a bouquet of balloons on a string, and you yanked it. Well, they didn't one at a time. Everything moved.
I understand.
And it is the strangest thing to see it. You know what I'm saying?
It is.
But what do you attribute that to? Is that a family thing?
I don't know. I can tell you the one time that I seen it when it was amazing was Tim Decker, who we all know is a good flyer.
Oh, definitely.
Brian Krog, I think, was down from Canada judging, and Tim put his birds up in the first 15 minutes. Those birds flew in a circle. They didn't do nothing, and then something happened, and I think in the last 3 or 4 minutes he scored over 300 points. They consistently did it. It was like there was a wall here, and here came the birds. Boom!
So that's something that I witnessed. That's something John has witnessed. So it's something that I think we all need to strive for.
I don't understand what, I've never been able to understand what
it's almost
that
like
is.
the birds were in sync. They were linked together, and it's not like the lead bird went and everybody went after him.
They hit that wall and boom.
It's boom, and they all go at the same time.
And maybe it was something in the air. I don't know.
I don't know what it was, but I watched it and I witnessed it several times, and every time I've seen it,
it's a hell of a nice break too.
It is. It was. Matter of fact, it's funny, on that particular fly, Will was the leader, and his birds went up. They flew a little too high, so they couldn't be judged. They came down, and what they did when they came down, which half of the time was already gone, scored him the highest score.
Yeah.
So shout out to Will. Awesome.
Did he?
Awesome
Was
kid.
he the one that won the fly?
No, he didn't win the fly because somebody else went on to score more points. Their birds flew the whole time and they worked the whole time, so they were able to accumulate more points.
Yeah.
But a lot of guys that flew did really well as far as their performance. A lot of guys need to work on their kit performance, the birds actually kitting together,
right?
Because a lot of people had issues with they didn't kit together. Some had issues with the birds didn't roll at all. They just flew a little too fast. I don't know if they were getting hit by the falcon, whatever the case may be. But a lot of guys need to go back to the drawing board, and as we all do from time to time.
See, the hardest thing that I found in this hobby is breeding.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people get a bird that somebody bragged about or they paid huge money for, and that bird's just not a producer. And what happens...
Let me stop you there. A really good point. And the reason I say I wanted to stop you, you said breeding is the most important.
It is.
And they'll buy a bird, and that bird is not a producer. One of the things that I heard said is a lot of times we kind of, focus an expectation on a bird.
Yes.
Because a bird is great in the air, we automatically project on that bird that it is going to be a great producer. And that's not necessarily true.
No, it isn't. I mean, you're much better breeding out of a bird like that than one that doesn't do it, of course.
Yeah.
But that's what makes our hobby so difficult. I kind of find out sometimes some of your very best spinners are not your very best producers. It might be a sister or a brother out of that same pair that that you don't think that highly of, that's actually a better producer.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
you got to have birds that are capable of producing
Mm-hmm.
spinners. That's the whole key. I think when we get to a point and we have birds that produce spinners,
Mm-hmm.
we got to make sure we get a spinner out of that we can work with, because let's call them A pigeons.
Right.
And then when you use a lower bird, it's like a B student down here, and then you're still okay because
Right.
you're in between this.
Right.
But then when you breed something out of this B pigeon, pretty
Right.
soon you can't make an A pigeon anymore.
Right, because you've accepted and added to your breeding
Yeah, you
program.
accepted mediocrity.
Right. So if you've got birds that are really good performers in the air but don't kit.
Oh no, you got to get away from those.
So
You've got
wait.
to.
So if I got a bird that's great, I mean it's 40 feet, it's amazing, it's the fastest roll, it does everything right, but it will not kit.
No, that's Monty Neville, who I think we all knew in this hobby. One day we were out on a fly, and Monty made a statement. He said,
Right.
if you raised the best spinner that ever lived,
Right.
and that bird didn't kit, you'd have to kill it. And that was Monty's thing. And and here's a guy that knew something about pigeons. He won, I think, 4 World Cups or something.
No, he won 10.
No, just
I think it was 10.
no. He probably qualified 10 times.
Well, he
but-
may have qualified 10, but
Yeah, he won
so he
3 or
won
4.
4 World Cups
Yeah.
then. But
But he was a hell of, when a guy like that makes a statement, got to pay some attention to it. I mean,
yeah.
what's he just talking through his butt?
No, he obviously
he's
got
not.
he's got a wealth of experience behind
Right.
him and proof,
And,
so.
and then again today, we all have to deal with this beast that we're messing with. The hawks are totally
Oh yeah.
ruining
Yeah.
our hobby.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's awful hard to get a good kid of birds together when the falcon is hitting you or the coopers are attacking you every day.
Right.
Makes it very difficult.
Yeah. So, how important is type to roll?
Well, I love a nice type on a pigeon.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a firm believer again, and I'm going to make this statement, and some of my buddies still can't seem to get this.
Mm-hmm.
When you get that bird in the air,
Right.
and that bird's wings kind of disappear like we're talking about,
Right.
the best spin you got,
Yeah.
well, the question you got to ask yourself, is that bird the right type?
Yeah.
Well, I would say yes, because if he wasn't the right type,
It wouldn't be
he
able to do
couldn't
that.
be able to do what he's doing. So this is where you can move forward with.
But you know what's crazy? I hear you and I acknowledge what you're saying, but at the same time, and I'm a firm believer in type.
Yeah.
I have a hen that I call my blur hen. Guess what? It's a horrible type.
Well,
How do you explain that?
Well, I can't.
I can't either.
Because I always figure it this way: all birds can roll.
Yeah.
And maybe all birds can spin.
Right.
But eventually, the bird that's not the athlete or built like,
Right.
I always say, I love that on the Olympics, the 30-meter platform.
Right.
Now, those guys that are diving off of this are girls.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes they hit the water and they're just a poof, little splash.
Yeah.
Now, that's the right type.
Exactly.
And that's what I always compare those with rollers. I
Yeah.
don't know if that's a good
No.
comparison or not.
No. I totally understand it. I get it, because when I look at that bird, and the one thing that bird has that none of the other birds that flew in that kit had was the muscle. The muscle on that hen was
Yeah.
unlike anything else that I had.
Well, you have to have that muscle, because without that muscle, if the bird is spongy or loose, they
Yeah.
can't get around. He can't do that. Just like if you and I tried to go on that 30-meter platform, there'd be an oil slick on the water.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
that's what I'm saying. There's so much difference, and that's what's interesting about our hobby.
Right.
And if you're satisfied with what you got, well
Mhm.
then, but you can always move forward.
Yeah.
Always.
Yeah. So
And the idea is you don't only get one of those birds. Like I have a good friend of mine, and he wants to make one perfect pigeon. That's
Right.
his goal.
Mhm.
Well, I'd rather have 8 or 9 of them in my kit that ain't quite perfect.
right.
That's where I'd rather be.
So type is definitely a really important
Type
factor
is
in
very important, and I think the main thing that I look at is the keel setting and the wing structure.
Right.
And I really think the wing structure, the wing has got to be cupped. And sometimes you see birds where the wing's real flat.
And straight.
And the way I look at it, when they try to roll, they're kind of slapping on the air.
Yeah.
And if you get that nice wing with that nice cup to it,
Right.
as they do their thing, they're grabbing that air and pulling themselves.
So when you look at a wing, if we're looking at a bird's wing that's completely open, here's the the backside where the feathers, where the wing butts are, right?
Yeah.
And then you got your primaries and secondaries. That wing should be straight in origin or angled or
Angled.
kind of angled.
I think the wing on a pigeon kind of tries to wrap around its body a little bit.
Okay.
That's, I think, the ideal wing. And again, if up in here in this part of the upper part of the wing
Right.
is where the cupping is.
Yeah, where the secondaries are.
And I think also you don't want them big wide feathers because then you get that paddle thing again.
Right.
You know, I think the air has to kind of move through those feathers, so
Yeah.
you got to have
Yeah.
the smaller feathers.
You know, it's funny. Many times you look at a bird that is the hardest working bird in the kit, and you look at the secondaries, and they're completely shredded. They're gone.
Right.
So, my thinking process, I bred and I tried to keep those as short as possible because if that's where the air is being channeled through,
Yes.
if there's less resistance there.
Well, you know, I don't know. I think what happens,
Right.
what Smitty's talking about is next to the quill on
Right.
a really hard spinner.
Right.
There'll be holes.
Yeah.
And sometimes that quill breaks.
Right.
And
And it's usually on the inside portion of the
right.
wing.
It's underneath the armpit.
Yes.
You might say.
Yes.
But I remember when that bird rolls, he turns his head backwards too. And I think, at least in my family, I look at it, and a lot of it's on the left side. More
See, I
than
found
the
it
right
on
side.
both.
Well, you find it on both, but
Yeah.
I find greater on the left.
Uh-huh.
And maybe that's where when that wing slaps, that bird the beak hits that and does that damage. I don't know.
Yeah. That's definitely a point to consider. One of the things that people always ask about and talk about is eye sign. I mean, is it just an eyeball to see out of, or is there some other significance to it?
Well, you know, that's a good question because, you know, in the past, for sure, we had a lot of people that, man, the bird had that eye they stick a flashlight in and had to dilate. The pupil had to go down to nothing. I think you got to have a good eye on your pigeons. Like my family of birds have very good eyes. The pupil
Well, when you
basically
say a good
centered.
eye, what are you referring to?
In other words, it's more like giving you more of a flashlight effect. In other words, like you look at the bird and you notice its eye.
Does it have to do with the character?
Yeah, I think it does.
Okay.
I think it's good character in a pigeon. And
So,
character is a lot important. Do they sit on the eggs?
Right.
Do they protect their youngsters? I've heard guys say, "Hey, having trouble. My birds get off the youngsters when they're 10 days old. Let them die." See, those kind of birds you got to move away from. That's a terrible trait that you're creating. There's all traits in these birds. These birds are what you are. What you breed out of is what you're going to get.
So, you notice, should the eye be perfectly centered in the entire circle? Or because you see some eyes are off-centered, they're pushed close to the front.
No, I think, I don't know. It's kind of an
What
old
you
wives'
look for.
tale. I've heard that if the pupils are towards the front of the beak,
Yeah.
well, that's a good sign that the bird's too hot and he's going to roll down on you. I like a nice clean eye. I like that pupil to be almost centered.
Yeah.
And it's nice when you get some correlation in the eye where you get stuff. In other words, a lot of red, maybe
Yeah.
different colors around the pupil.
What about one of the eyes that I've always found extremely attractive? Two people have bred consistently these birds. One, and you know him well, Juan Navarro.
Yeah.
Remember that green eye that Juan used to breed into his birds? That was just stunning to
See,
see.
again, my old Bloss line I used to get some of those green eyes.
Yeah.
It's again something. It's actually an orange eye.
Yeah, it's an orange eye, but it has a green tint
But it has
to
a
it.
green tint to it, and
Yeah.
it's kind of a lime green
Yes,
color. Yeah,
yes.
kind of neat.
The other guy that I've seen that consistently breeds an amazing eye is Paul Gomez. His birds have the same green eye. They have that gray gravel, that really textured gray gravel eye. Those two people, Juan and Paul Gomez, I've seen those with those birds, and they're just stunning birds.
Yeah, and then I don't know. I have a friend of mine that he studies eyes all the time on the birds, but I just like to maintain that clean eye, that expression, and I think that's important because sometimes you get a bird, and I've done that with friends that come over. They bring their bird over, sit it in the show pen, nice eye on this bird, and then I take one of mine, and all of a sudden the guy looks at his bird and says, "God, mine's kind of flat."
Yeah. So when you talk about expression, it's actually a physical attribute of that bird.
Yeah, because the thing is, I look at it this way: if you put a certain bird in your show pen, and all of a sudden that bird looks at you, that bird, he's speaking to you.
Right.
And then that's what I call expression. When you get a bird, he just kind of sits there like,
Right.
here I am.
So let's talk about temperament. What is temperament?
Temperament. My birds have great temperament.
Mm-hmm.
You put a bird in a show pen, you don't want him bouncing off the walls of the
Mm-hmm.
show pen.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want that bird jumping off the eggs when he sees you,
Mm-hmm.
or cause of that kind of trouble.
Mm-hmm.
You want the birds to be calm, and yet you don't want them to the point where they just sit there and let you grab them.
Right.
And,
Okay, so a couple other things that I wanted to go over that I thought were really important. Why do you raise pigeons? Why do you raise rollers? Yeah, isn't it a funny question? Why? What's the purpose? What is your purpose in it?
I like animals for one thing,
Mm-hmm.
and again, growing up as a young man in Artesia,
Mm-hmm.
all my buddies had pigeons, and most of them had rollers. And I think what happens, these damn birds get into your blood. And I think if you see improvement as you're moving along with your pigeons,
Right.
they more and more get under your skin or into your blood. And
Do you remember the first time you saw a bird roll?
no, not really.
Really?
Not I don't. God.
Did you start out with pigeons or rollers?
No, rollers.
You started out with
I always
rollers.
had rollers. I started when I was about 13, 14, something like that.
Yeah.
And I know it. The first time I seen it, I can't remember, but it sure in the heck stuck with me. And when I got out in '74,
Mm-hmm.
then when I started dating the wife I'm married to now, I started talking about pigeons again, and then
Right.
she bought me a box. There was Christmas, I think, of '85. There was a box of pigeons under the Christmas tree.
Wow.
And I started again, and the birds I got, I didn't like the roll. I mean, I remember that spin and the depth when I was a kid.
Right.
And then we talked about going to Borges, and I started there. But
Mm-hmm.
the why, why would anybody do this? All the work cleaning these feathers in the molt season,
It's not easy.
and keeping them in good health and
Right.
stuff. Yeah,
Right.
it's you gotta love them.
What is your purpose for raising them?
My self-satisfaction.
Self-satisfaction?
Yeah, I get a real kick out of giving a bird away or giving a bird to someone and they call me up and say, man, I got a nice one from him. That really gives me some great satisfaction. It really does.
Yeah.
Because, I'm not too much I used to be pretty much into the kid competition, and I kind of gave it up a little bit. I had my birds stolen, and you kind of have a whole different outlook on that. But I raise these birds for my satisfaction, not for anybody else.
Right. So if I'm a newbie and I'm getting into rollers or something that I'm thinking I wanna try, what would you say? How should they start? How would they pick stock?
The thing is, not to get too crazy and spend too much money, because when I got back in the mid '80s,
Right.
I did that. I spent way too much money,
Right.
and you gotta find a friend,
Mm-hmm.
somebody that's got nice pigeons, and someone that'll help you, because you've got to be mentored when you first start.
Right.
You've got to learn how to feed. You've got to learn how to fly, and so many people don't get a mentor.
Right.
In other words, hey, come to my house. I'll sell you this bird for $100, and it'll raise you all kinds of good pigeons.
Right.
But they don't know how to raise good pigeons. They really don't know. They don't know how to fly pigeons, and you see so many newbies get in and then get out
Right.
because it's difficult.
So
It's not easy to raise a good stud of pigeons.
So really
You know,
important to find somebody to mentor
yes,
you
you
if
gotta
you're
have
going
a
to do it
mentor.
correctly.
Yeah, I mean, find someone that'll sell you some birds for reasonable,
Right.
and then as you're going along, he's helping you, and then says, "All right, I gave you these. I'm going to give you better ones." And I think most guys that'll be a mentor are that way. You might buy a few birds from them,
Yeah.
and then afterwards they see you're doing okay with them.
Yeah.
They'll help you out. They'll give you some better birds,
Right,
because
right.
nobody's going to give a newbie their best pigeons. I mean,
So one of the reasons that I call this channel the Roller Pigeon Evolution is the evolution is not the birds. The birds are fully evolved. They're not going to evolve into something else. It's the individual, the person.
yes.
That was one of the things, because I always look back at where I started and how I evolved to where I am
Me
today.
too. I mean, it's like with this family of birds. There was a
Right.
time I always liked the Pinson type of birds,
Mhm.
and I always wanted to make a stud of pigeons. I didn't want to do a lot of crisscrossing to start with,
Right.
and it was difficult. I had birds that didn't kid. I had all kinds of problems, and but my love of these pigeons kept moving me forward.
Mhm.
It was something that's in my blood.
Right.
And it's hard to to build a stud of pigeons. I've had this family for 30 years, and I'm still progressing.
Right.
Evolution. You got to keep progressing.
Yeah, you have to keep moving
You know,
forward.
if you get one really good pigeon, well, look
It's
at
not
this
over.
kid.
That's not where it ends.
Right. There's one really good pigeon up there. Well, wouldn't you rather have 2?
Yes.
And then maybe 4?
Yeah.
And then maybe a good kid where people go, like there was one guy in England that won the World Cup 4 or 5 years ago. And the video is on YouTube, I believe, and it was really great. When the judge gave him his score, there was like 20 guys in the yard. They gave up and gave him a standing ovation.
Wow.
So wouldn't you like that? If people were at your house and gave you a standing ovation because
Exactly.
you flew some pigeons, man, you could have a big old smile from ear to ear.
Yep. And that's really gratifying.
But you got to have help. You can't do this alone when you first start.
Right.
You know.
It's about mentorship, and one of the reasons that we do this type of program is to let people at home know that, look, there are a ton of things that you've got to learn, but it's all worthwhile, and it's all towards improving the quality
You
of
get
birds.
that one pigeon that you're going to go, wow.
Right.
Like they say, make the hair on the back of your neck stand up. Well, then you've got a nice beginning. And if you make one, you can make more.
Okay, so you have some people that have cock-based families and some people that have hen-based families. Which is more important, the hen or the cock?
Well, there's always a statement in Bill Pinson's writings that he says a great cock is very, very valuable, and good hens are relatively a lot of them.
Right.
And you got to have good hens, but I'm a firm believer. I probably breed, say, 50 cocks a year, and I keep 1 or 2.
Right.
I'm death on cocks because I want to see that cock spin.
Right.
And you get a lot of tremendous hens that roll, but to get a cock that's tremendous is a little bit more difficult.
Now, see, one of the things that, and I agree with you as far as if you look at my stock pen, there are more hens in there than cocks for a reason.
Same here.
Now, the odd thing is finding a dominant hen is really rare. To me, a hen that really, regardless of which cock you put her on, she's going to produce solid, amazing quality birds. And I've had few birds like this, and literally I've tried them on what is garbage roll just to see. And I've produced way better roll than that bird could ever produce.
Yeah.
And it's on that hen. And they're rare. I think the red-headed hen was a bird like that.
A bird, cocks too, a cock that produces on every
whatever,
hen you
yeah.
put it on.
Yeah.
I mean, they're not easy to find.
No.
And that's why matings are so important.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really a believer, if you get a click pair, put them together. In 2012, I put a pair together because I forgot to mate some hen I had, and I only had 1 hole left.
Right.
So I mated this hen up to a cock that, he was a nicely bred cock, but he was just pretty, and I kept him because he was out of my best cock.
Right.
And that pair really clicked. But then again, the first year I raised 6 youngsters, and every one of them made.
So John, one of the things that I want to touch on is muffs or clean leg. Do you breed clean-legged birds, muff birds? Are your birds mixed?
All my birds are clean-legged. Once in a great while, I get a feather on the toe. That's
Okay.
about it. But they're all. It's got to be in the birds again.
Right. But you prefer clean-legged birds.
Oh, I don't care.
Yeah.
I really don't.
Does
care.
it really make a difference? Do clean-legged birds roll better than non?
No, of course not.
So
I don't think so anyway.
Right.
But no, it's not in my birds, so I don't get it.
I'm of the same opinion. There's no difference. No difference at all. So let's talk about first of all stocking birds.
Okay.
So do you, as your preference, do you stock from the air? Do you stock from the nest?
Well, when I built this family, everything was out of the air. Everything. Lately, again, the last 2 years, we've had that Newcastles, and I've put away a few birds. I gave away all my kippers, like I told you.
Right.
But I did pinch a few back for myself. And now what I'll do with those is when I breed out of them, I'm very selective on really pay attention to their youngsters.
Right.
And if they don't produce a good youngster, well, then I get rid of both of them. But no, after 30 years of breeding this family, I can put a bird away once in a while.
Yeah.
I don't mind doing that. And I have done it periodically, like my 20 hen. I didn't fly her; she was out of 65.
Right.
And that's probably my best producing hen I own.
Right. And she wasn't flown.
No, but all her brothers and sisters were.
Right. Right.
She was just the last bird out of that mating, and I put her away, and it turned out to be a good one.
So when you put your pairs together, what kind of criteria do you use as far as saying, okay,
Okay.
I'm gonna take this hen, this cock? What
That's
goes into
interesting.
that?
In the off season, I spend a lot of time in my man cave, you might say, and I start putting pedigrees together. Like,
Okay.
not that I breed off of pedigree,
Right.
but I look at how they match up, what their ancestry is. My family's very, very tight, and I don't want a bit too tight if I can help it.
Right.
But I'm not a believer that you made a deep one to a shallow one. You mate the best you can, the best they match up.
Right.
And once you understand your family, I think it becomes a lot easier.
Which takes time to
Yeah,
understand.
and what I do, again, I usually raise 6 birds off of a pair.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the season, if one of those birds can't make the 18, well, then I look at the pair. And maybe it's a proven hen that's already produced with other cocks. And the cock I've used maybe was a real nice one from last year, but he didn't work out. I give him away.
Yeah,
Okay?
you
I
reevaluate
keep
your
trying to make sure that the pair I put together produces at least one good 18 bird.
Right.
If you can produce 2 or 3 out of 6, man, then you're doing really good. But I've had occasions where I've produced 4 or 5.
So one question, kits. Let's talk about building a kit. So when you fly your birds, say if you bred 40, say 60 birds, do you shift birds around in those kits?
Not too much.
Okay.
I like to see a kit develop by itself.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like, and when I do, and Tim Decker always gave me this advice, if you're going to move a bird, one.
Yeah.
Move one.
Yeah.
And then when that bird gets accustomed to the kit,
Right.
well, then maybe you can move another one. He said, never take 3 or 4 birds. He says, because they'll fly different, and all of a sudden you got outbirds.
It changes the dynamic.
Yeah, it
of the
changes the
kit.
dynamic of the kit.
Nice.
And that's easy to do. Like Tim Decker also made another statement that makes a lot of sense. He said, if you got a friend that comes over, he wants a couple of birds, never give him a bird out of your 18.
No.
He says, give him some out of your stock loft.
Right.
He says, because you might get rid of the wrong bird out of that 18.
Right.
And they'll use their, like you say, they all of a sudden they're not the team
It changes the dynamic of
the
that.
dynamic can be changed. You might roll one down, and then all of a sudden the kit's not the same anymore. It's just amazing how you can screw up a kit of birds by just moving a bird or two. I think my good friend Tim was very good at moving birds around, because he
Right.
did a lot of that. I'd rather see a kit develop.
Right.
I don't like a lot of cocks in a kit.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like to fly only cocks, only hens. I do,
Right.
but when I get my A team together, I always like to have 3 or 4 cocks in that A team, and cocks that aren't aggressive. I
Right.
don't like aggressive cocks. I think a lot of people make mistakes. They get a cock up in the air, and here's one of them clappers that clap their wings like that. As soon as that thing lands, get rid of it.
Yeah.
You have no use for that bird. It's a troublemaker.
He's clapping
Or a
really
cock
well.
that comes down and he wants to mate with every hen.
Right.
Well, what do you think he's doing up there when he's flying? He's looking around saying, all right, which one of these babies do I get to mate with when I hit the ground? There's these kind of things you got to watch for.
So one other question. You're taking your young birds out of the nest. How big are they when you take them out? Are they fully feathered?
I watch under the wing.
Yeah.
They're just about fully feathered. I try to take them out a little bit earlier than that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the earlier you take them out that you can do it. I got a good friend of mine. He takes them real early and puts them on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
And I know some of the guys that breed open loft, they take all their youngsters, put them on the ground, because you got certain cocks that'll feed just about everything.
Yeah.
But no, I try to be careful. I think sometimes if you leave them in too long, then the cock gets kind of upset with them.
Yeah.
For sure, if maybe the next hatch, the eggs hatch. But I take them out. I don't know, what are we going to say? 3 weeks.
Yeah.
So
one of one of the things that I found, because I used to wait until they were fully feathered under the wing, they were good to go, and put them in a kit. And obviously, if you fly a bunch of kits, you're going to lose birds. That's just part of what happens.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I did, I started taking them out before they were fully feathered, and I started putting them in the kit cage where they can't fly. I mean, they're literally not
I got
completely
you.
feathered. And what I found, the birds will eat and they will drink. You're gonna have to show them where the water is.
Yeah, you gotta.
But one of the things that I found is that my amount of birds that I would lose went from anywhere from 5 to 7
Yeah, down to nothing.
Yeah. It went down to literally one or none.
The earlier you can get them up on the roof, the better off you are. And what I do, here's a little thing that I do with, like, say you got 12 youngsters you're going to take away from the parents.
Right.
And what I always do when I get them set up, I feed pellets to my breeders.
Right.
So I put some pellets and some grain in a tray.
As do I.
And then I use a water bowl. I don't use the first week or so I use a water bowl. I don't use the regular water.
Yeah, because they can't figure it out.
Yeah,
really.
but they'll figure out the bowl for some
Yeah,
reason.
yeah.
Because the water is right up to the top,
put
and
their head in,
they
yeah.
stick their head in it.
Yeah.
And I take a couple of old hens and I throw them in with those.
Right.
And then the hens kind of help them learn
Yeah,
how to eat. I
yeah,
take it. So
yeah.
that's just a little trick that I use.
Right.
That seems to work pretty. And then watch them. Because if usually if you take 12, you're going to get one that's kind of, I don't know what to do with myself. And that one there, you just got to dunk his head in the water.
Right.
And do that on the second day. Or if you, on the second day you put them in there, dunk all their head in the water for a minute.
Yeah, that's what I usually do.
And that usually does the trick. And then I in case you get one that's really stupid, and I get one once occasionally, I got a jar of this KT parakeet feed inside.
Yeah.
And I mixed that up and put it in a large syringe, and then one time, pow, down the throat. And that bird all of a sudden figures it out. He's all full of food now.
Yeah.
So, you know, they're just things you got to watch.
Yeah, true. So, talk to me a little bit about, and let me know what you think of color birds that were bred for color.
I don't, anybody that wants to do that, I'm fine with it. It's just, I'm old school. I come from the old hard-ass guys, like Kenny Billings,
Right.
Damn mongrels.
Right.
So I don't, it is not my thing. As you see, we were looking at some birds. I like the T-pattern dark checks.
Right.
Like I'm saying, put a little color in my birds, put some white flights on them.
Mm-hmm.
Or I got some of those mahoganies. That's my color project.
Right.
No, but my one of my best friends in the hobby, Randy Gibson, he's really into that. And I love it. I like to go over and handle them and look at them, and they're awful pretty. It's just not my thing.
Right.
But I don't sit there. You throw the feed, you can do whatever you want. If people think that those birds are as good a rollers as they got, hey, more power to them.
So the last thing I want to talk about is feeding your birds.
Okay.
So as far as your kit birds, how do you feed them? Are you doing the 50-50?
I'm pretty simple, and I keep things simple. I every year that I can remember, I breed everything individual.
Mm-hmm.
I feed pellets.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And if you feed grain, I tend to see birds throw food all over the place, and I've tried all the experiments between grain and pellets, and I think the youngsters are a hair better on pellets than they are on grain.
A lot healthier.
Yeah, they're just bigger.
Yeah.
And it's easier for the parents to digest it.
And
I think also people that have canker problems, I think with pellets, I don't think you get canker problems.
Yeah.
You don't have to feed grit. And I'm not a grit person anyway. I never leave grit in front of my birds.
Why is that?
I just don't. I never have. And what I do about once a week, I give them grit. I mix my own grit. I give a real nice grit, and they'll gobble it up in 5 minutes. And I've never had any negative effects from not feeding the birds a lot of grit.
Have you seen that garlic grit?
I tried that. My birds wouldn't eat it.
My birds love it.
It's funny, isn't it? How
I like it because it's a larger stone too.
Yeah, how one family likes it, because I not too long ago I bought some of it and I tried it, and my birds kind of looked at it and said, "What is that stuff?"
Mine love it, so I pretty much switched over to it.
Yeah.
For years I used the other stuff that everybody else has used.
But see, I don't. I also think maybe an old timer told me, and again maybe it's just wise tales, that when you feed the birds grain and grit, sometimes with the oyster shell they get a cut in the corner of their mouth, and that's what one old timer told me. That's how canker appears. But I've been real fortunate. I don't get canker because I've always fed pellets. Now, my birds, when I'm not breeding them, I feed what they call show conditioner. I think it's 15%.
Yeah.
And that's all I feed.
I use the breeder conditioner.
That's all I feed them. That's it. If I go to a pigeon show and I win a bag of feed of some other kind, I give it away.
Right.
And what I do basically with my flying birds, when I want to get a team ready for competition, I feed straight red wheat, because that way all the birds eat exactly the same thing. Now, just normally what I do, I take a bucket of the show conditioner, I take a bucket of red wheat, and I mix them together. And that's what one old timer told me. That's how canker appears. But I've been real fortunate. I don't get canker because maybe because I've always fed pellets. Now, my birds, when I'm not breeding them, I feed what they call show conditioner. I think it's 15%. And that's all I feed. red wheat,
Right.
and I take a bucket of Capricorn, which is a white Milo,
Right.
and I mix that.
Right.
So the show conditioner has a lot of Milo in it, so you're getting a lot of low carbs because of a lot of the Milo that you have in the feed,
Right.
and it seems to work for me. And
Wow.
that's what I look at. I think whatever works for you, works for you.
Yeah.
And just consistent. I'm very consistent because that's all I feed.
Nice. Well, that pretty much concludes all the questions that I've had for you.
Oh, okay.
Is there any last nugget that you'd like to leave with my viewers?
Yeah, again, guys, I'd like to, I think we all, and I'm just me, everybody, you got to raise better birds. And pay attention to our spin, and pay attention to the thing I would always preach. I've done a lot of judging, and if you want someone like me to score your birds and give you some good quality points, have some separation in your pigeons. I see too much of this where the birds are flying, they go like this, and somebody's saying 10, and I'm going, 10 what? And I just would like to see everybody raise a little better birds. And fewer is also better than a whole lot of birds.
Definitely, definitely. So, end point, let's make sure that we're improving the quality of roll that exists out
Yes.
there. And I want to thank you guys for tuning in for another edition of the Roller Pigeon Evolution. This is Smitty signing off. Thanks for watching. Make sure you hit the like button, tell a friend, and remember, you only know what you know. Thank you.